Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am Professor Oriaso Odongo, and my channel is Professor Oriaso Odongo's Knowledge Hub. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to talk to you today about sustainable energy resource use in a changing climate. Ladies and gentlemen, we have talked about climate change and the various issues, particularly its impact. Allow me to today look at the impact of climate change on energy resources and how we can deal with them. Ladies and gentlemen, we know very well that the use of fossil fuel that we have talked about previously is normally the primary driver of climate change. You can imagine what we had said, talked about a large amount of greenhouse gases. We talked about methane and how these are greatest contributors to climate change. If you look at the fossil fuels, we have examples like coal, oil, and even the gases. And we know from research and science that they are the largest sources of greenhouse gases, which account for around 68% of the global emissions that we are having. And we also know that they actually account for nearly 90% of all total carbon dioxide emissions that we have. So if you look at the energy sector that we are having, we normally say that energy sector emission is the largest of what we can have, and particularly from electricity and heat generations, if you look at all that. So we normally say that emissions also come from other sources, but from energy, it's quite a lot. We also get it from industries, from transportation, from buildings, even from agriculture, and even from the various land uses that we talk about. So then what normally happens is we always look for energy, clean energy transitions. So if you look at renewable energy, particularly renewable energy transition, we talk about energy efficiency in all sectors. You look at the building sector, the industry sector, look at even the transportation. That will normally reduce high energy expenditure or high energy demand. We also have what we are talking about as energy storage or sustainable land use, and all those sustainable processes as those that we normally encourage. And why do we encourage them? Because when we use them, when we bring in the concept of sustainable energy use, then we begin to resolve the issues. So where does the sustainable energy resource use come from or get into all this debate? We know that if we were to think of using energy that is also limited in ways that will enable us to continue to use them, then that would be what could really solve the problem. So we talk about sustainable energy resource use, and we say that it involves harnessing energy from naturally replenishing. If you look at environmentally friendly sources that we are having, and that is actually the gist of what we are calling energy transition. So the main aim of why we would go for sustainable energy could be three of them. One of them is we want to combat climate change. If we don't go for sustainable energy, then we might not really achieve that kind of that main goal. Secondly, we look at we want to reduce pollution. There's a lot of pollution, particularly if we use fossil fuels. And then the third one, we want to foster economic stability. Is it possible that we can continue to use dangerous energy or energy that exudes large tons of carbon dioxide or greenhouse gases and still develop our countries wherever we are? So what about if we were to really seek to develop at the same time limit climate change and all the devastating impact that it has? Then we look at those key sources. So where do we get sustainable energy from? We know that we have some very naturally occurring, very naturally replenishing sources that we have. Look at solar energy, look at the wind energy, look at hydropower, look at even biomass and even geothermal power. Say, for example, solar power. Solar power is one of the most important and most abundant renewable energy that we have. We convert sunlight directly into electricity, and you can see that across the globe we now tapping on this. And then wind energy is where we normally use the turbines to harness the kinetic energy of moving air. Look at moving air, for example. And these turbines normally very important in giving us what we call the clean energy. If you look at the hydropower, for example, look at we harness the potential of the flowing water or falling water, and so we use it to spin the turbines, and then we generate this kind of energy. When we look at the geothermal, we also tap this energy, particularly from Earth's crust, for example. Look at that. Is it possible that we can identify places in our continent where we can have heat that naturally originates from underneath, and then we tap it and we use it to produce energy that can be very sustainable? How about the biomass energy? We also look at the biomass energy, that energy that we can get from organic materials, say from wood, from agricultural residues. If we look at all that, even waste from agricultural productions, look at that. So if we are able to take them through processes of combustion, gasification, and a lot of other processes of fermentation, like we have been able to use, they are readily available. So if you look at solar energy, tapping on it, wind energy, geothermal power, hydropower, and biomass, if you go to those, then those are the ones that we are calling renewable and sustainable energy. And there are a couple of strategies that we can use to tap into this, or to get to use this, so that we move away from energy that is unsustainable, that which also leads to us releasing large amount of carbon that will cause climate change. How about if we do what we call holistic planning? So for us to use clean energy or renewable energy in a sustainable way, then we got to adopt what we call holistic planning. How is this planning supposed to take place? We know the various sources. We know the sources of this energy and how we can deal with them. Is it possible that we can plan such that all our energy resources that we have are supposed to be used in a structured way, that we end up not depleting it? Where do we start from? So that kind of planning is important. The second one is we look at the policy support. Is it possible that we can come up with certain policies that are homegrown, for example, that we are going to be able to use to incentivize? Does it mean that if we were to even bring incentives around policies to support clean or renewable energy, then things can really work? How about the third one of tapping into new technology and innovations? Africa or even other continents are not having problems with innovation, and particularly in the wake of technology. We can deploy technology to help us harness this kind of energy. So supposing we were supposed to use all this, then we can systematically use this. Energy efficiency, for example, it's always what we keep on saying, that even if we were to depend on energy that is not renewable, then we would use it in a manner that sustains it, that keeps it being used today and even being used in the future, by reducing the overall energy consumption. That is what we want to do. The other one is infrastructure upgrades. Is it possible that if you look at the general infrastructure that we have, that we have to harness energy, particularly from the fossil energy like nuclear energy or any other source of energy, then we want to change it to, or we want to modernize it, or to make them amenable for the kind of energy that we had not predetermined them for? Is it possible that we can even have to modernize the energy power grids, for example? So if we were to do this, then we say that we are shifting, or we are changing to clean, green, sustainable energy. Then it has a lot of benefits. What are some of the benefits that we can have? We have been able to say that if we rely on fossil fuels or fossil energy, then there's a lot of environmental pollution. If we were to go green, if we were to really use sustainable energy that can replenish itself, the way we have said, then we can protect our environment. We can reduce greenhouse gas emissions that we are talking about. We can even save our water resources, water sources. We can even save our natural habitats so that they don't get extinction. Even wild animals will still be there. We'll have all the other things that we wanted to be there. We can boost our economic development. We can even create jobs. It's possible that with clean or renewable energy or sustainable energy, we can still use them in the manufacturing, look at installation, in maintenance, in research sectors. We can stabilize energy prices that we are talking about. We can really stop or reduce our global reliance on fossil energy we're talking about. then we can reduce what we call energy, we can increase what we call energy independence and security. It's important because energy does quite a lot of things. If we become energy sufficient, then that could be good for our development. We can improve public health or health-related issues. We have been able to talk about climate change as leading to health complications. If these come from fossil fuels, but then we now change to clean energy, then we can address that. We can then enhance energy access, even in places that do not get access at the moment. Look at the rural areas, underserved areas. We can ensure that it happens. The energy is available to power many things that are there. You go to many places in rural areas, in places where people have started to harness this. You see the rural areas are well lit. Energy is there, ready to be used and clean. But then it doesn't come without challenges. There is a way in which turning to or changing to sustainable energy resources might come at certain cost, but the costs are manageable. There is what we call intermittency. If all this energy that we are calling sustainable are reliant on weather, particularly on climate, then you can imagine, look at solar, for example. If we were to really harness solar as one of the most important renewable energy, and it depends on sun and sunlight and all that, and weather and climate to change, then we got problem. Secondly, we have had situations of high cost of upfront or initial cost of such kind of investment. It's quite difficult to a large extent investing or starting enterprises with this kind of approach, because you see how much would you require to install renewable energy that can power your industry. You would have to suffer a little bit, particularly at the initial levels. We can have land and resource use challenge, particularly if we are to go large scale. Look at if we were to go large scale geothermal power or hydropower generation, or even solar power, for example. Then fourthly, we would need to recalibrate or reintegrate or integrate new kind of thinking into the mainstream thinking. Now we have the system as it is today. If we are supposed to now shift to sustainable energy, then we would have to do a bit of grid integration. The others could be to do with policy and even political barriers. It's a complex process. There are many things going on among stakeholders. People are thinking of, so how will this affect me? People normally do a cost-benefit analysis before they can adopt a new technology. So if renewable energy is one of the most important sustainable energy sources, and we say that we want to adopt it, then we expect that it will not go without challenges. Ladies and gentlemen, today I was talking to you about how we can harness renewable energy sources so that we have what we call sustainable energy resource use, particularly in the wake of climate change. And we've talked about things, how climate change affects energy resources. We talked about a great deal of it. How do we shift from fossil fuel to the renewable energy, and the many things we have said. Then we have been able to talk about the goal. So why would we want to shift? Is it because we want to combat climate change? Because we want to reduce pollution? Because we want to foster economic sustainability? Then we talked about some of the key sustainable energy sources that we have: solar energy, wind energy. We talked about hydropower, biomass, and geothermal power. And then we talked about the various strategies that we can use to harness them. And then we talked about some of the benefits. If we were to go to use sustainable energy resources, then what could be the benefit? And then some of the challenges. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to stop there. And I want to still urge you to continue to like, to share, and even comment, and even subscribe to the channel, because we have quite a lot of things that we are going to offer you only on Professor Oriaso Odongo's Knowledge Hub. Welcome again.